Breaking news just rocked the defense world. Canada has officially joined the European Union's massive €150 billion weapons program, and the US is completely shut out. Not as an observer or consultant, but as a full member, the only non-European nation with full access to Europe's defense power moves. Joint weapons development, cyber warfare systems, submarines, and defense financing, all built with Europe instead of bought from America. Mark Carney sealed the deal in February 2026, locking Canada inside the tent, as Defence Minister David McGuinty proudly said. Canada just scored a front-row seat at Europe's defense table, landing procurement deals the US can't even touch. This isn't a trade pact, it's a total power shift. Billions once headed to American defense giants are now flowing to European arms makers. Ottawa's next-gen submarines will be built with France and Germany, not the US. This is Canada's biggest defense shake-up since NATO was born. This massive shift happened after Trump spent a year threatening Canada's sovereignty while Europe offered real partnership. Now, we're breaking down what the Security Action for Europe program actually does, how Canada became the only non-European nation with full access, how it rewires NATO's balance of power, and how it's built to keep running even if the US walks away. Before we dig in, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into global power plays that actually matter. So, what is Security Action for Europe? It's the EU's bold answer to a problem that's existed since NATO's birth. European militaries have stayed weak because they've leaned too hard on the US, American fighter jets, American missiles, American radar. Even their ammo stockpiles are thin because Europe shut down its own factories decades ago and let production move across the Atlantic. Russia's invasion of Ukraine exposed just how risky Europe's military dependence had become. Sure, countries pledged huge defense budgets, but they quickly saw that buying more US weapons wasn't real security, it was just another form of reliance. If Washington ever stopped caring about Europe's safety, all that American-made gear would be useless without US parts and maintenance. That's where Security Action for Europe steps in. It's a €150 billion rearmament plan with tight rules. 65% of parts must be produced inside the EU. No more American specs, only European designs. Factories are now booming in Poland, Romania, and France instead of sending contracts to US giants. Poland's pulling in $43.7 billion, Romania $16.6 billion, and both Hungary and France $16.2 billion each. The program funds everything, from artillery shells to submarines to cutting-edge AI-driven cyber warfare tech. The real brilliance of this program isn't just the weapons, it's the independence it builds. Europe is finally creating its own defense industry. An industry that doesn't rely on American supply chains. Every euro spent pumps life into European factories and cuts out American defense giants. Each weapon system under Security Action for Europe is built to sync with European allies. No American integration needed. And now, Canada's right in the mix, building alongside Europe, buying gear through European procurement. But Canada's entry wasn't automatic. The EU originally built this program only for its members. That 65% rule was made to keep the cash inside Europe. The UK tried to get in and Australia opened talks, but Canada beat them both and scored full access, not just observer status. That deal locked in cooperation on cybersecurity, maritime defense, and space security, showing Canada was serious about breaking free from US dependence. But that early partnership was just the warm-up. Security Action for Europe is the real deal, packed with financing, contracts, and long-term military power. Canada had to go through a whole new round of talks to earn its seat, which wrapped up in December 2025. By February 2026, it was official. Now Canada's fully inside the program. Its defense companies can bid on projects backed by the $150 billion fund. The entry fee? Still secret, but Defense Minister McGuinty confirmed it's in the millions, not billions. That alone shows Europe wanted Canada in. Paying millions is symbolic, a clear sign Europe sees Canada as a partner, not just a buyer, and there's a reason Europe opened the door. Canada brings real assets, advanced maritime surveillance tech, Arctic know-how, cyber power, and critical minerals for defense electronics. But the biggest signal is political. Canada's inclusion tells Washington loud and clear that Europe doesn't have to depend solely on the US anymore. And for Canada, that membership is already paying off. Procurement Canada is now replacing its submarine fleet through this program. The Canadian Patrol Submarine Project is one of the biggest defense buys in the nation's history. It's a massive move. Right now, Canada's still running old Victoria-class subs bought from the UK back in the 90s. They're outdated and costly to maintain. They can't even operate under Arctic ice, which is becoming more crucial as the Northwest Passage opens up. Canada's known it needs new subs, but the question was always where to get them. The US, France, Germany and Sweden all build them. But every country uses different specs, supply chains and levels of tech sharing. Picking one meant choosing a dependency. But now everything's changed. Canada can jump into Europe's joint procurement network, teaming up with France and Germany on their next-gen sub. That means Canada can help shape the specs for Arctic operations and secure the tech transfer to build or maintain those subs right at home. This new approach saves serious cash through shared production and guarantees full compatibility with European NATO allies. The same shift is happening in cyberspace too. Canada's now plugging directly into Europe's cyber defense networks. We're talking AI-powered electronic warfare, advanced underwater sensors, and detection systems built to sync with European military tech. But make no mistake, Canada isn't cutting off the US completely. American fighter jets still fly Canadian skies, and NORAD stands strong. Still, the direction is obvious. Canada's future defense strategy is going global. Less reliance on US contractors. American defense giants just got shut out. Under Security Action for Europe, any country using program funds can't hire US contractors. The 65% European content rule blocks them completely. Every euro spent in this system is a euro pulled away from American defense firms. Now that Canada's joined, its defense money is taking the same route, shifting from US pockets to European suppliers. For decades, about 75% of Canada's military purchases came from America, but that number's about to die fast. Billions are moving. As Canada replaces its submarines and modernizes its forces, billions that once went south will now stay tied to Europe. Here's what that means in numbers. Canada spends around $15 billion a year on defense, with roughly $11 billion of that flowing south. But even if just 30% of that spending flips to Europe, that's a $3 billion hit for US defense companies every single year. Over the next decade, US defense giants could lose around $30 billion in contracts. It's a staggering blow. And across a submarine program's lifespan, that loss could top $50 billion. For years, these giants treated Canada like a guaranteed market. Buying American gear was always the easy route, perfectly aligned with NORAD and NATO standards. But Security Action for Europe just flipped the script. That submarine deal alone could hit $30 billion, and if that goes to a French-German consortium, that's a direct loss for American shipyards. Add next-gen cyber warfare projects developed with Europe, and we're talking billions more gone. Even US supply chains will feel the blow. This changes the balance of power. For decades, Washington had leverage, but that leverage is shrinking. As Canada pivots, the question remains, how will this move reshape NATO and the very foundation of our global alliances? Thousands of American defense jobs rely on exports, and for decades, Canada was one of the steadiest sources of income. But that era's ending fast. If Canada thrives inside Security Action for Europe and builds its own power base without US support, others will take notice. Australia's already talking with Europe, Japan's showing interest, and even South Korea is exploring new defense partnerships. Sure, US contractors could try to compete with better deals, more tech sharing, joint development, or lower prices, but that 65% European content rule shuts them out completely. They can still sell to Canada outside the program, but they're banned from touching contracts tied to the $150 billion fund, and that fund's only getting bigger. This shift shakes NATO's balance to the core. For decades, the US supplied most of NATO's muscle while Europe offered land and political backing. That setup gave Washington massive leverage. It could pressure allies by threatening to pull back on defense support. Trump didn't just hint, he flat out said it. He's questioned whether the US should even stay in NATO, slammed Europe for not paying enough, and used the threat of withdrawal as leverage on trade, China policy, and almost everything else. Security Action for Europe is Europe's direct response. If America can't be counted on, Europe's determined to defend itself. No more total dependence on US weapons, ammo, or resupply chains. That means building a real European defense industry, stockpiling its own missiles, and controlling production from start to finish. And now, Canada's move adds an unexpected twist. A North American nation, a founding NATO member that's fought beside the US in every major war since WTIT, is now building its military muscle through European procurement instead of American ones. That shift sends a loud message across NATO. The old power structure is changing fast. You don't have to pick between staying loyal to NATO and cutting back on US dependence. Canada's proving both can happen at once. This move reshapes NATO's inner politics completely. If Washington ever threatens to scale down its commitment, Europe and Canada can now point to security action for Europe and say, "We're already building the strength to stand on our own." That kind of leverage didn't exist 5 years ago, but it does now, and it's only getting stronger as Europe's financing turns into real weapons, real factories, and real independence from US gear. Experts are split. Some claim this shift could weaken NATO by building a European pillar that rivals American leadership, while others insist it actually strengthens the alliance by making members more capable and self-sufficient. Both arguments make sense, but one thing's undeniable. NATO's power balance is changing fast. It's becoming less US-dominated and far more even between America and Europe, with Canada now clearly leaning toward the European side. Security action for Europe isn't a one-off move. It's part of a clear pattern. From the China trade deal to the Luxembourg Finance Pact, the Hudson Bay Railway, new bridges, and fertilizer deals with Brazil and India, every step Mark Carney has taken follows the same playbook: build alternatives and cut dependence on the US. Trump sees it as betrayal. Canada trading with China, teaming up with Europe on defense, and investing in Arctic routes that skip American ports. But Carney's not turning his back on the US. He's building insurance. Insurance against the chaos of American unpredictability, against a president who one week talks annexation and the next demands trade concessions, against any future where Canadian sovereignty becomes negotiable. Europe gets it completely. That's why they wanted Canada inside security action for Europe. Both are building safeguards against the same uncertainty, and together they're stronger. Every new partnership gives Canada more leverage. If Trump threatens tariffs, Canada can pivot trade toward China or Europe without blinking. Trump can threaten to block defense ties. Canada's building weapons with France and Germany anyway. He can talk NATO withdrawal. Canada and Europe can now say, "We'll manage without you." This isn't choosing Europe over America. It's making sure Canada has real options when Washington turns unreliable. Security action for Europe is only the start. $150 billion already rolling, and more on the way. Canada's right in the mix, bidding on EU contracts, shaping next-gen weapons, and learning to build instead of just buying. Canadian engineers now work beside French and German teams. Tech stays in Canada, jobs stay in Canada, and money stays in Canada. For 70 years, US dominance defined NATO. Now that grip is slipping. Trump's pressure didn't bring Canada closer. It pushed Canada into Europe's arms. Canada's no longer a customer. It's a partner. The US wanted control but got defiance instead. A brand new era of independence has begun. Subscribe to Canada Today, the 30 for more breaking insight.